Well, let's bring in Mike Nellis now, who's a former social worker and professor in criminal and community justice at the University of Strathclyde. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike. It's thankfully, I believe, still very rare for children to commit such heinous crimes such as these. But we were talking there about children being exposed to very dangerous content online. How much do you think this is now playing a role in today's society when it comes to children either being vulnerable to adults with ill intent or children themselves starting to develop very dangerous ideas?
Well, and thank you very much for having me on, and that's a good starting point. You've already said quite a few things that I don't agree with in the approach you're taking, but on the issue of the net and the dark web, I agree entirely with all that has been said. It's a new factor in the way children are exposed to violence now. And as Trevor said, thinking about John Venables, that it didn't apply in this way in his case, and children can arrive at this point in their lives where they do horrendous things, fortunately very rarely, without the internet. But absolutely, we should impose more controls on access to violent material on the internet. We should absolutely do that. And if this case contributes towards pushing the government to take it a little bit more seriously than they do, that will be one good thing that comes out of this.
Well, Mike, let's move on to the trickier area of what you don't agree with us about. What don't you agree with us about? Well,
you started off by talking about John Venables, and it's about time his name was exposed and we could see what he looks like, and you've called him a monster. And none of that helps. None of that helps here.
What would you call him?
A person. I'll just call him a person. Yeah. A child killer, if you like. But I don't want to call anybody a monster, because if you call them monsters, you will never get to understanding why they did this. If you call them monsters, if you make them sound so different from us, then you'll never understand.
Well, I'll take that, Mike. I'll take that, you know, if say he was 12 or 15 or even maybe late teens. But at the age of 41, if we don't know about this guy already, you know, I reserve the right to call him a monster. I mean, he's been in and out of jail for paedophilia. And, you know, why can't you call the murderer of a 10-year-old boy who goes on to commit serious paedophile offences and to re-offend, long sentence? Why can't you call him a monster?
Well, he hasn't killed anybody else since, has he? I mean,
that's all right then.
What he did to earn himself the epithet in the first place was a horrendous thing for a child to do to a child, right? And that's when he did these horrendous things. But he's in prison now. I mean, they didn't give him parole. And I would have thought that was satisfying enough to people who still have vindictive instincts towards him. And there may be reasons for keeping him in prison. There may well be reasons for keeping him in prison. The parole board didn't want to let him go. But I don't think that... see, I'd never want to give up hope that somebody might change for the better, whether they're in prison or out of it. So I am most reluctant to talk about calling people monsters.
Well, So what you think that we should treat the two kids who killed Brianna Ghey, you know, with great sympathy?
Well, I don't think we can do that at the moment. I mean, nothing that's going to happen to them in the next few years is going to look like sympathy, and everybody's heart goes out to her parents in the way that they spoke outside the court.
Yeah.
These kids have done a horrendous thing, and they will go to prison for a long time. For certain, when they turn 18, they will not be let out of prison in the way that James Bulger's children were, because the climate of the times is very different anyway, regardless of what experts might say about their state of mind at the point at which they turn 18. So there's no sympathy coming their way from anybody at the moment, and that's very understandable. But they will go into a secure treatment unit, and they will be treated. They won't have their lives made hell any more than they've made it hell for themselves already. They will be treated by psychiatric experts who will try to help them to come to understand why they did what they did. And with all the influences on them that turned 15-year-old kids into killers of another beautiful child. And that's not sympathy, but I don't want them treated brutally. I'd be really suspicious of anybody who wanted them treated brutally. But they are going to be in prison for a long time.
You know, it's funny.
We just want them punished, Mike. We don't want them treated brutally, obviously.
It's funny. I've actually just finished reading a book by a forensic criminal psychologist all about treating patients inside Broadmoor, and she talks about the potential for rehabilitation. Now, when you look at a particular case like this one, we don't know very many details, particularly about the two offenders in this instance, but we do understand that there is, to some degree, an intersection here of autism mixed with exposure to extreme content. Are these potentially cases where, with enough treatment, with enough input, there could be some form of rehabilitation? And how does that work when their identities are going to be revealed?
They're all very good questions. I mean, certainly Gwen Adshead, the person at Broadmoor you're talking about, is a very good person to read on this, a very good person to read. And the honest answer is that you don't know in advance what the answer to the question is as to whether these people can be rehabilitated. But I absolutely believe that you have to try. You have to try. We have a moral obligation to treat people, even who have done terrible things, to get them back into some semblance of normal humanity and to come to terms with the horror of what they did. We do have to try, but there are no guarantees that people will change in a way that makes them safe. And some of them may never get to see the outside of a prison again. But we do have to try. And Gwen Adshead is a very knowledgeable person about that. And the stories she tells in that book should be read by everybody who wants to call people like this monsters. Because they're not. They're humans. They're versions of us.
Yeah, I got that, Mike. Thank you.
They're versions of us.
Yeah, they're humans. Thank you, Mike.